You are listening to The Soul's Quiet Call, written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 21, A Fragile Moment. The stillness in the air seemed to press down on Meera as she stood behind the counter of her flower shop, her hands mechanically arranging another bouquet. The gentle rustling of petals felt like a stark contrast to the storm raging inside her. It had been 2 days since Aarav had returned from his family gathering, and the silence between them was unbearable. He had withdrawn again, slipping behind the walls that she had thought, naively, were starting to crumble. She glanced at the door, half expecting him to walk through it at any moment, but he hadn't. There were no messages, no calls. Just the deafening quiet that surrounded her whenever she thought of him. Meera? The voice came from behind her, and she froze, her breath catching in her throat. Turning, she saw Aarav standing in the doorway, his eyes heavy with a mixture of confusion and sorrow. His presence, once a source of warmth, now felt like a delicate thread pulling her heart in 2 different directions. She opened her mouth to speak but couldn't find the words. It had been so long since they'd been in the same room, really together. "You've been quiet," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them, her voice small, uncertain. Aarav didn't respond right away. He just stood there, as though the weight of his thoughts kept him rooted to the spot. His eyes flickered around the shop, but they never met hers. "I don't know what you want from me, Meera," he finally said, his voice thick with regret. The simple words cut through her, sharper than she expected. She had been patient, understanding. She had given him time, space, hoping that he would come to terms with everything that haunted him. But now, the rawness of the moment left her feeling exposed, vulnerable. "I don't know what you want from me either," she replied, her voice wavering despite her best efforts to remain calm. "You shut me out. Every time I think you're opening up, you close off again." Aarav's eyes darkened, guilt clouding his expression. He walked toward her, each step measured, like he was afraid that any sudden movement would cause her to retreat. When he finally reached her, he stopped, just a breath away, and looked down at the bouquet she was still holding in her hands. "I never wanted to hurt you," he murmured, his voice low. "But every time I get close to you, I feel like I'm walking on a tightrope, one step away from falling. And I don't know if I can survive it again." Meera's heart clenched at his words. She knew the weight of his fear, the ghost of his past that haunted him like an unshakable shadow. But she was tired. She was tired of waiting for him to be ready, of trying to fill the gaps in his silence. "Do you even want this?" "Us?" she asked, the question slipping from her lips before she could stop it. The words hung between them, each syllable heavy with the weight of uncertainty. Aarav flinched, as though the question had struck him harder than any physical blow. He took a step back, his hands clenching at his sides. "I don't know. I wish I did. But every time I think I can move forward, I feel like I'm carrying 100 pounds of regret, of guilt. I left my family. I've hurt people I loved." And now, he trailed off, his words lost in the tumult of his thoughts. Meera's chest tightened as she watched him struggle with the ghosts of his past. She understood, she did. But she had to make a choice. She couldn't keep trying to fix him, couldn't keep putting her life on hold while he figured out his own. A soft, quiet sigh escaped her lips. "Aarav, I can't keep waiting for you to be ready," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't keep giving you pieces of myself, only to have you retreat again. I don't know what to do anymore." Aarav's eyes filled with regret, but he didn't reach for her. Instead, he stepped back, his expression full of anguish. "I don't know how to let go of the past. How can I be with you when I can't even forgive myself for everything I've done?" For a long moment, they just stood there, the silence growing thicker between them with each passing second. Meera could feel the tears threatening to spill, but she refused to let them fall. She had cried too many times already, waiting for him to heal, to let her in. "I'm tired of trying to fix things," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I don't want to be the person who's always trying to mend broken pieces, especially if they're not willing to be whole." Aarav's face faltered, and for a moment, Meera thought she saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a quiet understanding of the weight of her words. But just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by the familiar wariness that had always kept him from fully opening up. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice raw. "I don't want to hurt you. But I don't know how to be what you need." Meera closed her eyes, her chest aching with the weight of his words. "And I don't know how to wait any longer, Aarav. I've spent my whole life waiting for the people I love to change, to see things my way. I can't do it anymore. I can't wait for you to be ready to love me." There it was, the breaking point. The moment when everything came to the surface, when the hurt and the hope collided in a single instant, leaving them both standing on the edge of something they couldn't quite name. Aarav looked at her, his eyes softening as he took another step toward her. "I don't want to lose you," he said, his voice shaking. "But I don't know how to fix myself. How can I be what you need when I'm so broken?" Meera met his gaze, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the pull of her gift, didn't feel the urge to read him, to see the depths of his heart laid bare. She simply saw the man in front of her, the man she had fallen for, despite everything. And she realized that for all the pain, all the uncertainty, there was still something worth holding on to. "You don't have to fix yourself, Aarav," she said softly, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "You just have to show up. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be here." Aarav's eyes searched hers, as if he were trying to understand if she truly meant what she said. For a long moment, there was nothing but the soft sound of their breathing, the world outside fading into nothing. Then, as if driven by something deeper than words, Aarav slowly, hesitantly, reached for her hand. Meera didn't pull away. She let him take it, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers, the unspoken apology, the yearning to make things right, even if it couldn't be fixed overnight. In that quiet, fragile moment, they didn't need words. They didn't need promises or confessions. They simply needed each other, the raw, imperfect pieces of themselves laid bare. But as the seconds ticked by, Meera knew that this moment would not last. There were still walls to tear down, still fears to face. But for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the faintest whisper of hope, knowing that no matter how fragile, it was enough to keep them moving forward. And as Aarav gently squeezed her hand, she realized that perhaps, just perhaps, they were both learning how to let go of the past, of their fears, and trust in the possibility of love. Even if it was just a fragile moment, it was a moment worth fighting for.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Refer to the channel playlist for a better experience and close your eyes to let your imagination run wild. Subscribe.